Well, hello, everybody. We are here today with Joe Asher. And Joe is a fellow who we're going to learn a little bit about him in a couple of minutes, but he's received a lot of publicity the past few weeks for doing something that is currently unique, and that is starting up a network of live sports books in the state of Nevada. Uh, so he's kind of a David among Goliaths right now. And Joe, hello.
Good to see you, Frank. Thanks for having me.
It's always great to see you, Joe. Um, Tell us a little bit about your new enterprise, Boomers.
So, Boomer Sportsbook, which opened for business on August the 1st, is we're 100% Nevada focused. And what we're doing is trying to build out a network of retail sports books across the state of Nevada, where in addition to betting over the counter, people can sign up for a mobile account. And then, of course, they can bet wherever they are in the state of Nevada. As you know, Nevada requires in-person registration for mobile accounts, and that is what is driving this business. If you had remote registration for mobile accounts like you do elsewhere in the country, I wouldn't have bothered with this business. But I think the fact that Nevada maintains the requirement that you come into the brick and mortar sports book to sign up for your mobile account, I think that gives us an opportunity to build a nice little business by over time having a couple of dozen, maybe 30 locations spread across the state where people can come to sign up for mobile. So that's what we're doing. We've got a great team of people involved in this business. It's a little bit like the Eagles show with the Sphere here in Las Vegas. You've got some of the original cast members and then some new folks as well. And folks like Nick Bogdanovich, who's probably the most well-known bookmaker in Las Vegas. He was the head bookmaker from William Hill back in 2012 until the very last day when Caesars bought the business in 2021. Dave Grohlman, our head of operations, same thing. Dave worked with me at William Hill, as did our head of HR, Debony Blackburn, and a number of other senior people in the business as well. So a very experienced team, and we're doing this as a Nevada only business with a laser focus on executing on what I think is a pretty good business plan.
Okay, great. We're going to learn a little bit more about Boomers in a minute. But tell folks a little bit about the Joe Asher story because you had an unusual path to the gaming industry, starting as I believe it was an attorney for a bond house, Cantor Fitzgerald. And how did you end up in Nevada in the gaming industry?
Well, to be fair about it, you have to really go back even further, Frank. I was born in Delaware and was around gambling at a very early age. My dad was a gambler, so I was going to the racetrack as long ago as I can remember. I was shooting dice in the back of a butcher shop when I was 9. Learned to count cards and blackjack when I was 12, been around gambling for my entire life. I started working at the racetracks in Delaware, starting when I was 16 at Brandywine Raceway. Worked at Harrington and Dover Downs as well. Went up to Foxborough. I used to announce the horse races for a living at one point. I was the youngest race caller in North America. And then I went to law school. I stayed in school, managed to get through the University of Delaware by the hair of my chinny chin chin, and got into law school, and then did pretty well in law school, and went to work for a big law firm called Skadden Arps. And then I had after I left the practice of law, as you mentioned, I went to work for Cantor for a bit. And then I decided I wanted to get back into the gaming business, and that's ultimately what led to me moving to Las Vegas nearly 20 years ago now, and then ultimately getting into the sports betting business. First by starting a company called Brandywine Bookmaking, named after the racetrack, of course, and sold that business to William Hill in 2012, and then stayed on to run the William Hill U.S. business until it was sold to Caesars in 2021. took a little bit of time off, had a stint at IGT, and then left there about a year ago and started working on Boomers.
So Joe, and you could tell me whether this is an apocryphal story or a true one. But when you were at Cantor Fitzgerald, and this is several generations ago technologically, that they had invented this portable device whereby their traders could trade. So if they're going off to the bathroom, they can still be hooked into their business and not have to take off for 20 minutes. Uh, and so they developed that device, and it occurred to somebody, maybe you, that you know what, if you can trade on this, you can bet on this. And that the idea then was, let's go to Nevada and see if we can get this kind of arrangement legalized. Is that a true story? That how it worked?
Uh, I mean, basically, Cantor came up with the idea of allowing people to play casino games away from the casino floor. And I say came up with the idea, but not necessarily that the idea originated with Cantor, but that's what Cantor tried to then commercialize in Nevada. And I was only there for a brief period of time after the efforts to get things going in Nevada started to gain a little bit of traction. Anyway, the product eventually did get launched at the Venetian, but I had gone by then. Although I did go down to check it out one time at the Venetian many years ago.
And then, as you said, from there you went off and you started your own independent sports book operation, and then you went off to a corporate world and dealt with the guys in the UK at William Hill, and now you're back home as an entrepreneur with a sports book, and you've got a different kind of name. It's Boomers. Where did that name come from?
Well, you got to go all the way back to those racetrack days. There was a racehorse who came down out of Canada named Boomer Drummond, and he became the top older pacer in the U.S. and principally at the Meadowlands is where I remember seeing his races. And the announcer would say, "And there goes the Boomer," and I sort of had an affinity for the horse. Anyway, fast forward 20 some years later, Cynthia, my wife, and we got a couple of rescue dogs. The first one was Lucky, which the sports betting business I started and sold to William Hill was named Lucky's Racing Sports Book, was the trading name. The corporate entity was Brandywine Bookmaking. But we used the Lucky's name for that. Well, Lucky's faithful sidekick for so many years was a dog named Boomer, who was about a 20-pound Dotson Cocker Spaniel mix. And so this time around, we named the business after Boomer. He had a great run. He lived for 17 years, died on Thanksgiving Day in 2024. And so, in starting this business, I decided to go with Boomer. I also think it's a good sports name. Whether I was with somebody the other day who was from Oklahoma and was wondering if Boomers was about Boomer Sooner. And then, of course, you had, Boomer Esiason and Chris Berman. So, but it's named after a dog who was named after a horse.
Well, in a country filled with horse lovers and dog lovers, it's probably a good choice. Now, I keep reading these stories, and in all of these stories, they say, quoting you, "I'm having fun." How much fun are you having?
Well, it's great to be back in action. I was with Gary Ellis, who was our key business partner and stepped up early by agreeing to turn over sports books to us. He had William Hill in there up until very recently, and terminated his agreements with them to go with Boomers. And Gary and I were talking, and he says, "Yeah, you just want to be back in action, don't you?" And I thought about it for a second. I was like, "Yeah." So look, it is fun. It's fun building something, creating something, getting the band back together. creating jobs for folks and doing something new. And I'm definitely enjoying not being in the big company world. You know, big companies like IGT or William Hill. Um, you know, by almost, I'm just not cut out for those environments. You know, things just are harder to get done, and there are more constituencies, and it's just harder to get things done. And you know, in a small company, of course, you don't have any of that bureaucracy. You can be nimble, and if you want to do something, you do it. And so I'm definitely enjoying that aspect of the business. Um, and you know, look, I'm very sober about it. We got a lot of work to do. We got open right on time, very smoothly in Elko initially, and then down here in Las Vegas on Monday. You know, we had the classic Vegas sportsbook opening. Former Mayor Oscar Goodman, you know, came over to Ellis Island with his famous showgirls and made the ceremonial first bets. Um, and so that was all fun, but you know, we got a lot of work to do, and we've got, you know, we got to get customers. We're getting a lot of press, but ultimately the customers decide. And we've got to get people through the doors to Ellis Island and to the Valley Verde and up in Elko, and get them to sign up for the Boomers mobile app. And obviously, we were able to get this business up and going at the perfect time, right in advance of the football season. And you know, that's thanks to the Gaming Control Board, who really worked to accommodate that schedule, and it's much appreciated. But you know, I'm very sober on the work ahead. We've got another location that we expect to go live in September. We've got a couple more under contract. I just signed a contract yesterday with another location. We've got some others that are pretty close to getting done. So feel pretty good about where we are, but you know, we got a lot of work ahead of us.
You know, you talk about the difference between the entrepreneurial world and the corporate world, and always reminds me of Larry Lipinski, who was a casino manager who had worked with Jack Binion, and then he also worked with Harris. And he said, you know, uh, when I worked for Jack Binion, if he decided that color coding bedding with linens, you know, one color and so on, uh, to make laundering an easier process, he said Jack would call me up and he'd say, "Larry, I want you to color code your linens." He said, but if it was Harrah's, they would appoint a committee and they would study it for at least 6 months.
Yeah, look, it's just harder in a big company. I'm not negative big company by any stretch, right? I worked for Skadden Arps, which is one of the biggest law firms in the world, and you know, William Hill had 15,000 or so employees across the globe, and you know, by the end of my run there were over 1,000, and IGT was probably somewhere around that 15,000 number during my tenure. I don't know exactly, and nothing wrong with companies like that, but I'm just not cut out for them. You know, it took me a little while to figure it out, but it's just um, not what I'm cut out for. I'm much more suited, I think, for this sort of thing when it comes to professional endeavors. And I'm glad I took it on. It's a lot of work, by the way. I probably had forgotten about how much work it was going to be when I started. You know, and it's, you know, just finding a bank that was willing to bank us. You know, you'd think somebody is coming to the door and saying, you know, I'm going to be depositing millions of dollars with you, and you know, can I sign up for an account? And you know, we got the stiff arm, right? Bank of America said no. Nevada State Bank said no. You know, it's just because they weren't interested in banking a gambling industry startup. But you know, fortunately, initially with a local bank here in Las Vegas, and then with Wells Fargo, we were able to get up and going. But you forget how things that should be easy are not easy. But you just have to, you know, you just have to slug through them.
Okay, so now you're the little guy among giants. What kind of competitive advantage can you provide to players?
Well, it's a great question. So, from the value proposition to the customer is really as follows. First of all, to sign up for the Boomers app, it's not like you have to give up your existing app. We're not saying you got to take the William Hill app off your phone. You can keep that one. We're just saying just add ours. So that's number one, and then the customer can compare the lines, and if you like the Eagles and they're -3.5 at Boomers and -4 somewhere else, well, of course you're going to lay 3.5 instead of 4, or maybe you can get an extra 5 cents on the money line, something like that. A big focus on fair, what I consider to be fair pricing for consumers, and my mindset during the William Hill time always was, look, give customers a fair shake and we'll do perfectly fine as a business. And, there's been a lot of focus on margin amongst sports betting companies, right? And FanDuel has touted that, they have a 14% margin, and DraftKings is somewhere, I think, 10-ish or so. And Caesars, William Hill has made a big effort to increase their margin. But the way I think of it, would you rather hold 10% of $1 million or 7% of $2 million? Right? The analysts in the investment community may be focused on the 10%, but I'd be more focused on the $1.4 million in revenue, or $140,000, excuse me, of revenue in my hypothetical. So I think fair pricing, where the customer is getting a good bet. It doesn't have to be a race to the bottom from a pricing perspective. I've never been in favor of that. So that's one thing. Number two, we've come out with a very attractive sign-up offer for customers. If you deposit $250 or up to $250, we match it in free bonus bets that are available to customers. We've got a promotion that we're going to be rolling out in advance of the football season to try to get people to bet with us during football season. So doing things that should be attractive to customers. And I come at this from a customer perspective because, I got 4 sports betting accounts on my phone. And one of the things I've been doing post William Hill is betting on sports. And so I know what's out there in the market. And I think we can come up with something that's attractive for customers. Then there's the customer service aspect of it as well. Everybody loves to do customer service by chat these days, and I get it. You save money, but it may not be the best customer experience. I mean, I had an issue with a canceled flight on an airline recently, and I couldn't get a hold of anybody. And I was relegated to first chatting with a bot before I eventually was put in a queue to then get a hold of somebody who was completely unhelpful to me. Right? I think by offering real customer service to people in the sports books and then on the back end through a phone number and through chat. I'm not anti-chat, but it's nice to have a phone number to call too. I think we can make some customers happy in that respect as well. So look, this is all easier to do in a small business, right? And certainly in a privately held business, right? And in public companies, it's quarter to quarter, and there's this hyper focus on margins, and we talked about the trading margin. There's obviously the operating margin as well. These things are definitely easier to do in a small private company. So those are some of the things that we're setting out to do.
Okay, great. We'll talk about a couple of industry issues here in a minute, but maybe a final question about Boomer. You've just extolled the virtues of a small privately owned company, but you've already got off to a fast start where you've got multiple locations in a relatively small state in terms of population. What is the long-term future for Boomers? Do you always stay this small Nevada company, or do you become a larger enterprise?
Well, I'd like to become a larger and larger Nevada enterprise. I mean, look, the opportunity only exists here in Nevada, and it exists because of this in-person sign-up requirement. Okay, if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be bothering. Right, would not be bothering. I'd had more time out at Del Mar this summer. I gave up my summers at the racetrack for this business. So definitely sticking to this focus of Nevada. I mean, look, you never say never, but we've had people approach us about doing sports books, one in the Southeast, one in the Northeast, some in the Midwest. And somebody was in my office wanting to know if we'd be willing to work with them on going after some small tribal opportunities. And that's all tempting, but we are sticking to this business plan of being a Nevada-focused enterprise. Look, you never know what the future holds. I mean, there's plenty of things I never saw coming, but I think we've got a winning formula here. We just need to go out and execute on it.
Okay, great. Sports betting has proliferated throughout the country now. It's proliferating internationally, online. Uh, iGaming is now twinned in many, many places with sports betting online. How do you see this whole digital online sports betting and iCasino evolving? Do we have too much of it at some point? Do we have legislators who begin to impose restrictions, worried about the problem gambling, for example?
Yeah, look, that we could have many conversations around this topic. Clearly, from a sports betting perspective, the business is moving online and away from retail, and there's no reason to expect that to ultimately be any different. Certainly, we've seen some issues in different areas regarding, maybe it's the allegations around betting per pitch in Major League Baseball this season, or Jonte Porter, and betting the under on some things, and then he gets out of the game. And so I think the hyper focused on prop betting has certainly caused some issues, and now we see some discussion, I think, in Ohio of doing away with prop bets. The challenge is, we who operate in the regulated sports betting world, we've made the choice for it, so we shouldn't have any expectations of sympathy. But these are very heavily regulated businesses. I think the more regulation and limitations you put on the legal tax-paying regulated business, the more you push people away. You push people to offshore, or you push people to these unregulated or really unregulated things like the prediction markets, which are supposedly under the auspices of the CFTC, but it's fundamentally unregulated gambling, which I'm not a fan of. And so I think regulators, policymakers have to be smart around that, because the legal gambling industry is paying a lot of money in taxes and generating lots of jobs, and the harder you make it to be in the legal regulated market, the more it helps the black market or these unregulated markets as well. And we've seen the effective tax rates going up, right? And there was the tax rate increase in Illinois last year, and now there's the surcharge this year. I mean, that just makes it harder for the regulated industry to compete with the offshores or the bookie down the street. My dad, he was betting on sports 50 plus years ago with Tony, the guy who had the little betting backroom betting operation in downtown Wilmington. So legalizing sports betting has brought it out of the shadows into the sunlight, to paraphrase from Adam Silver. But I do have concern about making it harder on the legal and regulated industry.
So if you were to get out your crystal ball and look at the industry 5 years from now, what would you see?
Um, I think it's a great question. I think there's probably some higher taxation in some places. Hopefully, the regulation is able to be at a steady state, so um, you don't have these ideas of putting competitive disadvantages around the legal and regulated business. And then I hope this CFTC goes back to the idea that a commodity is grain or corn or pork bellies and not who's going to win the Super Bowl.
Right. So I ask you one more question, Joe. Uh, and this is getting maybe a little further afield, but the buzzword of our era is artificial intelligence. And obviously, in the world of sports betting, it plays a role because you've got so much data and you can do so much now with that data, especially in a predictive way. Uh, how do you see artificial intelligence affecting sports betting and maybe the gaming industry generally?
Well, in a lot of ways, and I'm by no means an AI expert, although I read quite a bit about it. Um, from a customer choice perspective, I've always thought if I happen to like to bet the Golden Knights hockey games. They're the local team here in Las Vegas, and I'm a fan. And it'd be nice when I open up my app on a game day, the first thing that appears is the Golden Knights game, right? That the app knows why Joe Asher is logging into his account and shows content that's specifically designed for me, right? So I think that can be helpful um, from a product perspective, for instance. Um, there's clearly a lot of thought and discussion around, customers making their bets based on AI, right? And so you could certainly argue that as AI is perfected, there's a lower margin ultimately at the end of the day for sports books if the customer gets that sophisticated. Um, but there's always going to be room on in the business for unexpected outcomes, and there's a limit to what AI is ultimately going to be able to do in that regard. Um, and so I think we all look at AI and think about how it's going to affect the industry that we're in, um, and what that means for the customer experience, what it means for jobs. Who's going to do these things. So it's clearly going to impact the industry, but I don't think any of us really know the full extent of it.
Okay, great. Well, we've covered a lot of territory here in a short time. Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, when your viewers make their way out to Nevada, if they happen to be in Las Vegas, go on over to the Ellis Island and sign up for the Boomers mobile account.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, Joe.
All right, thank you, Frank.